It feels like every time you turn around, there's a new scam or cyber attack in the news. You really got to be careful out there in the digital world these days.
It's true. The threat landscape is constantly changing, and it's more complex and dangerous than ever.
And that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive today.
We've got a bunch of really interesting sources, articles, even an audio segment, and we're going to break them down.
So you can understand what's most important and why it matters to you.
We're talking about stuff like a country that's holding tech companies liable for scams happening on their platforms.
And AI chatbots that are spreading propaganda, it's wild stuff.
Yeah, really fascinating and concerning developments.
So let's jump right in. One of the most interesting things we came across is how different countries are approaching these challenges.
Yeah, like Australia's new scams prevention framework. It's a pretty groundbreaking approach, I'd say.
It is. It's a big change from how things have been done in the past.
Basically, they're making banks, social media companies, and telecom carriers responsible for scams.
If a scam happens on their watch, they could be hit with a massive fine.
$50 million to be exact.
Wow. That's serious.
Yeah, the Australian government is serious about making it really hard for scammers to operate.
Their goal is to make it virtually impossible for scammers to reach Australian residents.
Ambitious, but I like their thinking.
Me too. So how are they going to do it?
Well, they've laid out a bunch of specific measures that these companies have to take.
Like what? Give us some examples.
For example, social media companies will now have to verify the identities of all their advertisers.
Which is a good thing, right? How many scam ads have we all seen on social media?
It's ridiculous. This could really help cut down on that.
And banks are being told they have to do a better job of identifying who they're sending money to.
That's right. They need to make sure the money's actually going to the right person and not some scammer.
Makes sense.
And then there are the telecom companies. They're being told they have to get better at detecting and blocking scam calls and text messages.
We've all been on the receiving end of those. It's infuriating.
It is, and it's often the elderly who are most vulnerable to those scams.
So this new law is definitely a step in the right direction, but I imagine it's going to be pretty expensive for these companies to implement all these new measures.
Yeah, it's estimated to cost them around $100 million a year.
$100 million? That's a lot of money.
It is, but think about the scale of the problem.
And the cost of not doing anything.
Exactly. It's an investment in protecting consumers and maintaining trust in the digital economy.
And has anyone said anything about how well it's working?
Well, the Australian Banking Trade Group has come out in support of the law.
Really? I'm surprised.
Yeah, they're actually claiming that they've already seen a 33% reduction in scams since the law came into effect.
Wow, 33%. That's a significant decrease.
It is. It's a good sign that this kind of legislation can actually make a difference.
It also suggests that these companies were capable of doing more all along.
Possibly.
So, Australia's scams prevention framework is one approach. What else did we learn about how governments are tackling cyber threats?
Keeping your systems safe is super important as businesses rely more and more on digital systems, and that's where turnkey cybersecurity can really help.
Yeah, we're here to help small businesses just like yours make sure they're safe and sound in this crazy world of cybersecurity. And we offer a whole suite of services specifically tailored for you. So that's ensuring CMMC compliance and doing penetration testing. We also run vulnerability scans, and we can help you develop a comprehensive risk assessment.
And it doesn't stop there, right?
No, it doesn't.
We handle incident response, should the unfortunate happen, and we guide you through migrations like GCC. We just want to make sure your transitions are smooth and that you're secure.
It's all about peace of mind, right? You focus on what you do best, running your business, and we'll make sure that your digital world is safe and sound.
Well, there's another interesting development in the U.S. related to the FCC.
The FCC, those are the folks who regulate communications, right?
That's right. They've been handing out some pretty big fines to telecom companies for allowing spam calls.
Oh, yeah, I remember hearing about that. Hundreds of millions in fines.
Exactly. It's a good sign that they're taking this seriously.
But it makes you wonder why we haven't seen something more comprehensive here in the U.S., like Australia's approach.
It does make you think,
Yeah.
why not hold these platforms directly accountable for the scams that are happening on their networks?
Yeah, it's a question worth asking. Maybe we'll see something like that in the future.
It's possible. The landscape is constantly shifting.
Speaking of shifting landscapes, let's move on to a totally different kind of cyber threat. Disinformation and propaganda.
This is where things get even more complicated, and in some ways, even scarier.
Because it's not just about stealing money or disrupting services.
It's about manipulating people's minds.
And one of our sources had a really disturbing report about how Russia is using AI chatbots to spread propaganda.
Yeah, it's a pretty ingenious, if unsettling, strategy.
Apparently, they've figured out how to exploit the way AI language models learn.
These AI chatbots, they're like sponges. They soak up information from all over the internet.
And they don't really discriminate between what's true and what's false.
So what the Russians have done, according to this report, is create millions of articles and websites.
Millions! That sounds like a huge undertaking.
It is, but they're apparently very committed to this strategy.
And they're spreading these articles all over the web.
Hundreds and hundreds of websites, all pushing pro-Russian propaganda.
And the AI chatbots are ingesting all of this.
Exactly. And when researchers tested these chatbots, they found that they were repeating these false claims
How often?
about a third of the
A
time.
third of the time. That's a lot.
It is, and it shows how effective this tactic can be.
So they're basically poisoning the well of information that these AI models are drinking from.
That's a good way to put it. It's digital sabotage.
And the worst part is, there's not much we can do to stop it.
Yeah, once this disinformation is embedded in these massive data sets, it's incredibly difficult to remove.
The article we read said it's like there's no way to unjust it.
Exactly. It's a serious problem.
Because it means that the information we're getting from these AI systems could be tainted without us even knowing it.
That's right. It undermines trust in AI and raises serious questions about the future of information integrity.
So we've got scammers trying to steal our money and governments trying to manipulate our thoughts.
It's a scary world out there.
It is, but there are things we can do to protect ourselves. We just need to be aware of the threats and take steps to mitigate them.
Exactly. Knowledge is power.
And speaking of knowledge, let's move on to the next topic. The U.S. government's new National Resilience Strategy.
This is a pretty big development. It's a presidential executive order that lays out a new approach to national resilience.
And cybersecurity is a key part of that.
Absolutely. The order emphasizes the importance of state and local governments, as well as individuals, taking a more active role in preparing for and responding to cyber incidents.
So it's kind of a shift away from the federal government being the primary responsible party,
It is. It's more of a shared responsibility model.
which makes sense in a way.
It does. State and local governments are often closer to the action. They have a better understanding of the specific threats and vulnerabilities in their communities.
But it also seems like there's a bit of a disconnect here.
Also,
Well, the executive order is calling for more responsibility at the state and local levels, but at the same time, the federal government has been cutting funding for programs that help states with cybersecurity.
you're right. There's a risk and cost shift happening here.
So they're being asked to do more with less,
Exactly.
which seems like a recipe for disaster.
It could be, especially for smaller towns and rural communities that may not have the resources or expertise to handle these complex threats on their own.
Yeah, it raises some serious concerns about equity and preparedness.
It does. And it's not just about funding either. There's also the issue of intelligence sharing.
Oh, right. What about those federal intelligence sharing centers, the ISX?
A lot of states relied on those for critical information about cyber threats.
But the government has been shutting them down.
They have.
So states are being told to do more with less money and less information.
It's a tough situation.
It is. It makes you wonder if the U.S. is really prepared for the cyber challenges of the future.
It's a valid concern.
Well, on that somewhat depressing note, let's move on to our Security News Bites segment. We've got a bunch of quick hits to cover here.
Sounds good. Fire away.
All right. First up, a reminder that humans are often the weakest link in the security chain. Cyber News is reporting that a North Korean hacking group tricked a bunch of venture capitalists into downloading malware.
Oh no, how did they do that?
They used a Zoom patch scam. They impersonated a VIP and sent out a message saying there was a fake update for Zoom that people needed to download to fix some audio issues.
Classic social engineering.
Yep. People are always in a hurry, and they want things to work, so they click on links without thinking.
It's a constant battle.
It is. Okay, next up. The Register has a report on the FCC's decision to form a new council to combat foreign threats to American tech infrastructure.
Interesting. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, the FCC is concerned about foreign governments trying to disrupt or steal American technology.
Makes sense.
But there are some questions about whether the FCC is the right agency to be doing this.
Yeah, I mean, they're experts in communications, but Are they really cybersecurity experts?
That's the debate. Some people think it's overkill, others think it's necessary.
Time will tell, I suppose.
It will.
Yep.
Okay, moving on. Computer World has a report on the French government's ongoing quest for an encryption backdoor that only they can use.
Oh boy, here we go again.
They just don't give up, do they?
Nope. They're convinced that they can find a way to break encryption without compromising security.
But everyone who knows anything about encryption says it's impossible.
It is. Any backdoor, no matter how well-intentioned, creates a vulnerability that can be exploited by bad actors.
It's like leaving a key under the doormat.
Exactly. It defeats the whole purpose of having a lock in the first place.
Well, let's hope they come to their senses eventually.
Fingers crossed.
Okay, next up. Tom's Guide has a report on a major cyber attack that hit the law firm Wolf Halderstein.
A law firm. That's concerning. They must have a lot of sensitive data.
They do. The attackers got away with 3.5 million records.
3.5 million. That's huge.
Right.
What kind of information was compromised?
Social security numbers, government-issued IDs, all sorts of personal information.
Ouch. That's a big deal.
It is. And what's worse, the breach happened last December, but they just announced it now.
So they sat on this information for months.
They did, which is never a good look.
It makes you wonder what else they're not telling us.
It does. Okay, last but not least, there's a growing push by U.S. lawmakers to ban the Chinese AI app DeepSeek from federal devices.
DeepSeek, what's that?
It's an AI app that's been raising concerns about potential spying.
Spying. By who?
The Chinese government.
Oh.
Several other countries have already banned the app, including Italy and Australia.
So it's a pretty serious concern.
It is. It highlights the growing geopolitical dimensions of AI and data security.
It's a whole new battleground.
It is, and it's one
Yeah.
that we're going to have to navigate very carefully.
Agreed.
Okay, let's move on to the last item on our agenda, the audio segment from Mitch Tambam about the impact of cybersecurity on mergers and acquisitions.
This is an area where cybersecurity really hits the bottom line.
It does. Tambam starts off by talking about the Yahoo-Verizon deal. Remember that one?
Vaguely. Remind me.
Well, just as Verizon was about to buy Yahoo, Yahoo revealed that they had suffered a massive data breach that they hadn't disclosed previously.
Oh yeah, now I remember. That was a big deal.
It was. And it ended up costing Yahoo a lot of money.
How much?
Verizon knocked $500 million off their offer price.
500 million. That's a huge chunk of change.
It is. And Yahoo was also left with all the liabilities from the breach.
Yikes. Talk about a bad deal.
It was. And all because they hadn't taken cybersecurity seriously enough.
Apparently, the CEO at the time, Marissa Mayer, didn't think security was a big priority.
Which is crazy, right, for a tech company?
It is. But it's a mistake that a lot of companies make. They don't realize how important cybersecurity is until it's too late.
And then there's the Marriott-Starwood acquisition. That's another cautionary tale.
What happened there?
Well, Marriott bought Starwood Hotels without knowing that Starwood had been hacked a few years earlier.
Oh no. How bad was the breach?
It was huge. Millions of customer records were stolen.
And Marriott had no idea.
Nope. They only found out about it 4 years after the acquisition.
Wow. That's a major failure of due diligence.
It is. And it ended up costing Marriott a lot of money and reputational damage.
So the takeaway here is that cybersecurity is a critical factor in mergers and acquisitions.
Absolutely. Buyers need to do their due diligence and make sure they're not buying a company with a ticking cybersecurity time bomb.
And sellers need to make sure their security posture is strong so they can get the best possible price.
It's a win-win for everyone to take cybersecurity seriously.
It really is.
Well, that about wraps it up for this deep dive.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have. We talked about Australia's tough new anti-scam law,
The threat of AI-driven propaganda,
the shifting landscape of U.S. federal cybersecurity strategy,
and the real-world financial consequences of cybersecurity failures in mergers and acquisitions.
It's a lot to digest, but I hope it's been helpful.
Me too.
And remember, these are just a few highlights from the sources we reviewed. There's a lot more information out there.
We encourage you to do your own research and stay informed about these important issues.
So, here's a final thought for you to chew on. Given all the different cyber threats we've talked about today, what do you think is the single most important thing that individuals and organizations can do to improve their security?
It's a tough question.
It is, but it's one that we all need to be thinking about.
Absolutely.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.
Take care.